All right, students, let's go ahead and start 2.5, which is factoring 8x squared plus bx plus c. This is really important because we know that in 2.5, a is equal to 1. There is going to be notes on 2.6, which is factoring when a is greater than 1, but we want to make sure that we can solidify this factoring because this is obviously easier factoring than what we're going to do in 2.6. All right, so the essential question is, how can you factor when a is equal to 1? Before we get started into factoring, let's go ahead and practice. We call this the big X or the X factor. And what we're doing is we are creating a big X. I'm going to go ahead and cover this. Again, you have already stopped the video and kind of drew out the outline of everything. So we're going to go ahead and get started. What you're asking yourself is, my goal is to get these two numbers. And the way that I'm going to get these two numbers is, I have a 12 on top and a 7 on bottom. The 12 represents multiplication. So there are two numbers that when I multiply them, I'm going to end up with a 12. At the same time, these two numbers, if I add them together, I end up with positive 7. And so you need to be thinking about those two numbers. What two numbers make up 12? 2 and 6, but when I add them, it doesn't give me 7. 1 and 12, when I add them, they don't give me 7. And so the last set of numbers are 3 and 4. It really doesn't matter which one comes first. You can switch these and say 4 and 3. But you just want to make sure that when you multiply 3 times 4, you get 12. At the same time, if you add 3 plus 4, you end up with 7. So that's how we figure out what our answer is. And there you have it. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at B. You have a negative 24 on top and a positive 5 on bottom. Again, you're asking yourself what two numbers make up a negative 24. So let's talk about 24. 4 times 6, 2 times 12, 1 and 24, 8 and 3. But we got to figure out, first of all, there is a negative involved. And then we have when we add these numbers up, we have to end up with a positive 5. So there's a couple of things that we want to make sure we understand. I know if I have 8 and 3, that gives me 24, but I have to make sure, I know there's a negative involved. I have to make sure when I place the negative, you can't just place it anywhere. This is the part where it can get tricky. You can't just place that anywhere. So what we're going to do is we're going to play around with that negative. If I place the negative here, that does give me negative 8 times 3 is negative 24. But if I were to add negative 8 plus 3, that doesn't give me a positive 5. So it sounds like the negative is going to belong to 3. 8 times a negative 3 is negative 24. 8 plus a negative 3 gives me positive 5. So I know I did that right. Again, students, I encourage that you check your answers. All right, let's move on to the next one. Again, multiplication is occurring on top. Addition is occurring at the bottom. 21 and negative 10. So two numbers that make up 21 is 7 and 3, but I have to come up with this negative 10 when I'm adding my two numbers. And the only way you're going to do that is if you have negative numbers. Let's check our work. Negative 7 times a negative 3 gives me a positive 21. Negative 7 plus a negative 3, so I'm adding two negative numbers. Good, I did right. It's negative 10. So there's my answer. Okay. Please, students, I encourage that you double check your work. You'll have time, on quiz day or test day, enough time to double check your work as long as you're working productively. Okay. Oops, sorry. All right, let's go ahead and focus our attention on example 2. Now that we kind of have an idea of how we're going to use the X factor, the big X, we're going to use that for the problems. So let's take a look at A. Again, this is a trinomial. Okay, it has 3 terms. And this trinomial, I am actually going to label the trinomial. So let me find, I guess I can use this right here represents our A value. We have our B value and our C value. Remember, A, B, and C are constants, or coefficients, sorry. And so C's are constant. So we have a coefficient of 1. We have, so A equals 1, B equals 10, and C equals 16, okay? Please make sure you understand that. When we create the big X, your C, your A and C, you have to multiply A times C. That's going to go on top. So A times C is going to go on top. And whatever your B value is, that's going to go on bottom. Okay. So if you take a look, A times C is 1 times 16. So 16 is going to go at the top. Your B is a positive 10. And you need to come up with the 2 numbers that make up 16 if you multiply them. And when you add them, those exact 2 numbers up, you get positive 10. So 16, we're thinking 4 and 4, 2 and 8, 1 and 16. But what 2 numbers, if I add them together, is going to give me positive 10? And hopefully you came up with that number. It would be 8 times 2. Let's check our work. 8 times 2 is 16. 8 plus 2 is 10. So I am not done there. In example 1, we stopped right there. But now, if you read the directions, it's asking us to factor. So we need to factor completely. And how do we do that? We're going to create our binomials. So what this means is you're going to bring down your x, because we're dealing with x. And we have x plus 8 and x plus 2. This is our final answer. I know if I were to multiply these, I end up with x squared plus 10x plus 16. You can always double check your work if you're not comfortable, confident. By all means, please double check your work if that's the case. Okay, let's move right along. Let's take a look at B. Again, we want to make sure that we create the big X. So A is equal to 1 again, B is negative 8, and C is positive 12. Big X. What 2 numbers go on top, or what 2 numbers am I multiplying? A times C, which is 12. And B is not positive 8, but negative 8. So you want to make sure if there's a negative here or here, you want to make sure that you're multiplying the proper way and you get that answer. If not, it's going to be wrong. Okay. Now, multiplication is happening on top, so you're trying to figure out what 2 numbers make up 12. At the same time, those 2 numbers are going to add up to a negative 8. So we have a positive and a negative. That means that it looks like we're going to have 2 negative numbers. We're going to be adding 2 negative numbers. So we have 4 and 3 make up 12, but if I add 4 and 3, I'm not going to get 7. We have 12 and 1. If I add or subtract 12 and 1, I won't get negative 8. 6 and 2. If I multiply 6 times 2, that gives me 12. But if I add 6 plus 2, that gives me 8. So I know those have to be negative. So negative 6 and negative 2. Again, you can work out those numbers here. We said 3 and 4, negative 3, negative 4, negative 2, negative 6, negative 1, and negative 12. But again, this is the only set of numbers. If I add them together, that gives me a negative 8. Okay, almost done, students. X minus 6, x minus 2. If you write down x minus 2 times x minus 6, students, with your parentheses, that's fine. You're going to get the same answer. All right, let's move right along to the next one. I want you guys to get comfortable doing this because, once again, in 2.6, there's an extra step because then A is going to be greater than 1. All right, so we have our A is 1, our B is 7, and our C is 6. the top, to get this number, we have to multiply a times c, which is 6. 1 times 6. Our b is 7. And let's go ahead and think of, we don't have very many numbers. 1 and 6, 2 and 3 are the only numbers. But if I were to add them, I know 6 plus 1 gives me 7. So I know it's going to be 1 and 6. Or 6 and 1. Okay. And your final answer is x plus 1, x plus 6. Hopefully this is getting easier for you. Okay. All right. The last one for example 2 is D. Again, let's go ahead and create our big X. I believe we're used to that now. Remember, I'm going to stop labeling our A, B, and C. You should already know. If you feel like you need to continue to write that down, by all means, please do so. But we need to be able to recognize that A is 1, B is -4, and C is a -5. So to get this top number, I'm going to multiply A and C. So 1 times a -5 is a -5. And our B is -4, so that's going to go down here. Not too many numbers make up 5, just 1 and 5. But we have a negative here, so we got to figure out where that negative is going to belong. If I add these two numbers, if they're both positive, I'm not going to get a -4. The only way I'd get a -4 if this 5 were a negative. Then if I were to add the two numbers, that would give me a -4. So this is how I'm going to write it out. 1 and -5. Let me just double check my work one more time. 1 times a -5 is a -5. And then 1 plus a -5 gives me -4. Okay. X plus 1, x minus 5. There's your answer. All right, we have one last example, which is example 3. Now they're asking us to solve. Before, they were asking us to factor. And so that was a step. We're still going to do the exact same thing we did in example 2, but notice how it's equal to 0. So we're going to get some answers here. Now we're going to factor. We're going to solve. So x is actually going to equal a number. And we're going to figure that out. The first thing that you want to look at is it set equal to 0? If it's set equal to a number or equal to like 13x, then we got to bring that over and then combine whatever needs to be combined here. In this case, x is equal to 0. So let me write down the step. Set x equal to 0. Okay, check. X is equal to 0. We all agree to that. Now, what you want to do is you want to go ahead and factor x squared plus 15x plus 36. Okay, so go back to the big X. Remember, to get this top number, we're multiplying A times C. A is 1, C is 36, so 36 is going to go on top. Your B value is going to go on bottom, which is positive 15. So these are some large numbers. We got to figure out 36. So you're going through, you have your calculator, or I know you guys all have cell phones, and you are playing with some numbers, and you're like, okay, what is 36? What are the numbers? But you have to have, those two numbers that you pick have to add up to 15. So I'm thinking 12 and 3 are the only numbers. If I multiply, 12 times 3 is 36. If I add 12 plus 3, that gives me 15. So I know I'm on the right track. Watch what happens from this point. Remember, we said x plus 12 and x plus 3. Because it's set equal to 0, we're now solving. You must make sure it's set equal to 0. Okay, we're solving. Now what you're going to do at this point is you're going to create two equations. Here's the first equation, x plus 12. You're going to set both of them equal to 0. And x plus 3. And this is how we are going to solve. This is what we're looking for. We're going to, we know that if I subtract 12, we know that x is going to equal negative 12, or x is going to equal a negative 3. And there you have it. We're now solving. So x is going to equal some numbers. Final answer, x equals -12, x equals -3. Students, please make sure you show your work. Sorry, step 2 was the big X. And then the last step we actually solved. Solve for X. All right, let's go ahead and look at B. Again, if we're looking at the directions here, we're going to set x equal to 0. Is x equal to 0? It is not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to move this over to this trinomial, combine like terms. So I'm going to subtract 30. Subtract 30. Notice how I did not put this -30 under the 5x or the x squared. This is a constant, so I'm going to go ahead and combine it with my constant. Here we go. X squared plus 5x minus 50 is equal to 0. All right, so step 1, set it equal to 0. Step 2 says go ahead and do the big X. So here we are going to remember A times C goes on top. That's how we get the top number. Your B value goes on bottom, which is 5. And I'm seeing 50, I'm seeing 5, I'm thinking 10 and 5. So I got to figure out which one's negative. If I make this negative, I do get a -50. At the same time, I actually don't get, if this is a -10 plus 5, that doesn't give me a +5. So now I know that this negative belongs to the 5. 10 times the -5 is -50. 10 plus a -5 gives me +5. Okay, so again, we are solving here. Set it up, x plus 10 and x minus 5 is equal to 0. Set up your two equations. X plus 10 is equal to 0. X minus 5 is equal to 0. Again, I'm showing my work, students. And then we know if I subtract 10, x is going to equal -10. If I add 5, because remember we're trying to get x by itself, x is equal to 5. All right, there you have it, 2.5.